welcome everybody. Thank you for coming out. I really appreciate it. I'm Craig Failer. I'm the village planner with the Village of Oak Park, and I'm managing this process that we'll be talking about tonight. The housing study process will provide an update to our Homes for Changing Region report that was adopted in 2012 by the village board. This meeting is intended to gather your feedback on housing challenges and priorities for our community. The Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus will facilitate this meeting this evening and walk you through a presentation posing questions and seeking answers from you. Your feedback will be used to develop goals against which the village can evaluate housing programs, current and proposed policies, and future development outcomes. If you haven't already taken our online survey, please do that. We have had a good turnout for entries in that survey so far, and we hope to keep it going as long as we can. We are proposing to have a presentation to the village board in mid-October on the first phase of this project. So this is just phase one, and there are two other phases in this project. We hope to have the completion beginning of next year. So again, thank you for attending tonight, and I will turn it over to Ben.
Sure. Thank you, Craig. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out. I really appreciate you making time in your busy schedules to come out and talk and teach us tonight. This is the agenda for the next hour and a half, how we're going to spend our time. We'll do some brief introductions, give a little bit more detail into the housing study process that Craig outlined, sort of timeline and next steps from here. And then almost all of our time will be discussion. And we have a handful of questions, and we'll be asking you questions about what you see as the key housing issues and the key housing priorities in your community, and going from there. So that's how we're going to spend our time tonight. Some brief introductions here. I'm with the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus. This is a nonprofit organization. It's an association of mayors and elected officials from across the region. You can think about it like a chamber of commerce is an association of businesses. The Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus is this association of mayors and communities across the entire region. So it's been around since 1997, and we support several programs like the Homes for a Changing Region program. And then join with me tonight is my colleague Brad Winnick, and I'll let him introduce himself here a little bit.
Now?
Sure.
Oh, sorry. I've clearly never been an elected official. I don't know how to use a dais mic. I'm embarrassed to admit it. So hi, I'm Brad Winnick, as Ben indicated. I have a small consulting firm called Planning Aging, and that firm works at the intersection between community planning and the evolving needs of aging communities. And I partner with the caucus on some other work, and so they said, hey, we're doing this project in Oak Park. Do you think you might want to partner with us on that too? And I said, sure, sounds great. Then they said, good. It doesn't hurt that you lived in Oak Park for 22 years. So that's the other reason I'm here. My family and I lived in Southwest Oak Park for 22 years, up until about 2012. So you'll hear more from me shortly.
Yeah, and then most importantly, introductions from you all, and we may not have time to go one by one, but just thought we could do a show of hands. We think that, yeah, go ahead.
How about this? Everybody who lives in Oak Park, I'm guessing that's going to be everybody just about. Anybody who doesn't live in Oak Park? Okay, a handful, great. The folks who live in Oak Park in particular, who here owns where they live or lives in an owned residence? Raise your hands high because it's kind of dark. Okay, and how many of you live in rental? So majority in the ownership, a handful, no pun intended, rental. How about parts of town? Who lives north of Madison? So, okay, who lives south of Madison? So that one's about pretty close to 50-50. How about who lives east of here? Handful. Who lives west of here? Majority. Well, that's kind of skewed. We're not in the middle of town, but the north-south was a little bit. How about how long we've all lived in Oak Park? Who has lived in Oak Park 10 years or less? Show of hands. Okay, good number. How about from 10 to 30 years? Ooh, a good bunch of hands went up. And now, how about 30 years and more? Pretty good blend of pretty nice mixture between those three different buckets. So that gives us a little bit of a sense of who we're talking with. So we'll leave it there so we have more time for the actual discussion shortly.
Sure. Thanks, Brad. Thank you all for participating in that. It really is helpful for us understanding the perspectives in the room today. Quick background on the Homes for a Changing Region program. This is a program that since 2005 has worked with over 60 Chicago suburbs to identify their top housing challenges and then identify some strategies that they can utilize to address those housing challenges. So the Homes for a Changing Region program is administered and facilitated by the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus. And we first worked with Oak Park back in 2012. And we'll discuss that a little bit as far as what those recommendations are. But we're really here today to update that report that was done in 2012, because it's been over 10 years. Quite a bit can change in 10 years, especially when it comes to housing. So our conversation today will be what you see as the key housing issues today and what you see as the priorities in the future. And that's where we are in the timeline of this housing study. Like Craig said, it's in 2 phases. The first phase is what we're calling Vision for Housing, and it's what are the key housing issues and what are the key housing goals that the community can work towards over the next 5 or 10 years. So we've had focus groups, a community survey. We'll show the link to that community survey at the end here tonight, and then tonight's public meeting. And we'll carry on everything that we've heard to the board sometime in mid-October is the date that we're targeting that. And then after putting together the key issues and priorities, then we can begin to evaluate all of the current steps and how those current steps are helping Oak Park achieve those important goals, the goals that you all see as important. So later on this fall, we'll be evaluating the policies, the programs, the partnerships that the village has, see how well they are working to achieve the goals that you all share, and then give some potential suggestions about what additional steps could be helpful. And that action plan with recommendations on additional steps that could be helpful, we'll carry that over to the board sometime in the beginning of next year. So happy to pause if there's any questions about the process, but the main point I wanted to communicate here is that we are really excited to hear what you see as the key issues and the key goals today. And then we can begin evaluating all the steps the village is doing after that. Yes, question there?
Tell them about the microphone.
Have you already identified?
We're recording the meeting, so when we record it, we have to speak. Sorry.
Yeah.
Have you already identified the focus groups and the or even completed the focus groups yet? And if you haven't identified the focus groups, is there an opportunity to provide input on groups that might be helpful to talk to?
We have identified the focus groups. We've actually had the focus groups already. We have one more on Friday with our sister governmental agencies. But if there's room for others in that meeting, we could send you the link for this Friday. But there will be another round of focus groups in phase 2.
Yes.
Does phase 1 include any research around quantitative data?
Yes, ma'am. That's a great question. So phase 1 is both the qualitative data, what we hear from the community, and then combining that with the quantitative data. But it's always helpful for us to hear first, then we can begin looking at the quantitative data after that. Yep. Any other questions about the process? Feel good? Then we can quickly get into the questions and the heart of the discussion today. Sure, thank you. So I'll do a quick recap of the 2012 Homes for a Changing Region report and the recommendations that were in it for the village. One recommendation was to update the village's comprehensive plan and zoning ordinance and the regulations that apply to new development. The second recommendation was to increase workforce or affordable housing, along with senior housing options that are near transit. The third recommendation was to continue the foreclosure prevention strategies that the village was taking. At 2012, this was still just recently after the 2008 housing recession, and foreclosures were a lingering impact of that in 2012. So you can see how some of these recommendations were really from that point in time in 2012. The fourth recommendation was to work with neighboring communities to assist first-time home buyers. And then the fifth recommendation was to build on and continue the existing housing programs that the village offers. So back then, just as today, the village offers programs for single-family repairs, for small rental buildings to make repairs, incentives for multifamily housing to work with the village, and then also support and guidance for condo associations. So these were the top 5 recommendations that came out of that plan that might provide a glimpse of the types of recommendations that would come out of this process in early '24. But again, that's several steps away. The recommendations will really depend on the issues and the goals that we hear today. So it may be safe to say that some of the recommendations from 2012 were completed. Some of them are still ongoing work for the village and the community. So rather than just discussing the 2012 recommendations, tonight we're really going to focus on your perspective of current housing issues and future housing issues for the community. So with that, we'll begin. It looks like we have over an hour and 15 minutes of really us asking questions and hearing from you. That's about the most you'll hear us talk. And I'll hand it over to my colleague, Brad Winnick, to facilitate. I'll be taking notes, and we look forward to be hearing what you say.
Would you like it to come up here? Sorry, as you can see, we didn't choreograph this too carefully, so apologize if we're doing some of the stuff that's behind the scenes in front of the scenes. So the one question I forgot to ask you was, how many of you in the room completed a survey that was available online? I'm just curious. Okay, and how many of you did not complete a survey? No. Okay, so it's about half and half. The surveys are still available, and I just wanted to reassure you that if you completed a survey, we're going to ask some questions that are going to be relevant, but they're not going to be completely redundant. So I'd like to say you're not wasting your time by being here after having already given us some input previous. Oh, yes, ma'am.
I just want to acknowledge Mr. Failer, who was able to print out copies because there is a portion of the population who cannot do the survey online for various reasons. And so he did do that. And so for anyone here, or if they know anyone who needs that, he's happy to accommodate.
Oh. And that, Mr. Failer.
That's me. Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you, Sandra. So this is the part we really want to hear from you. You'll hear a lot less. So I'm going to try to get you to talk, but our goal is to hear you. So what are some of the key issues that Oak Park is currently facing? What are the housing issues that are the top of the list that brought you here tonight, I'm suspecting? So what are those issues? Please. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to point to you, and then there'll be the little bit of a delay to get the mic to you for recordation. So,
I'm interested in knowing, since 1973, the trustees every 2 years have signed an equity and inclusion statement, and I wonder to what extent that is being used and considered in terms of housing planning.
yeah, I'm afraid that's going
That's a good question. I know housing is one of their goals, one of their priorities. So whenever they redo that, every time there's a new village board, housing has always been on that list. And so I think this is showing you that they're going forward with trying to reach some of those goals and priorities for the village.
Thank you.
key issues. I believe, I apologize, it's a little hard to see all the hands, but I think the woman, just where you are, Craig. Please.
Hi. So I'm here tonight because my biggest concern is affordability. I was one of the people who was newer to Oak Park. I had the incredible luck to buy a home in 2019. I would not be able to afford that home now. Many of my friends who moved here at the same time, I feel similarly, and I worry about the people who would like to live here who no longer can afford to do so, and then it might become a place that only is available to the wealthy. I also acknowledge that half our housing is rental housing, and most of the apartments that are being built right now are also luxury, so I just worry about this sort of missing middle housing opportunities that exist for more working and middle-class families in our community, and I'm worried that it's going to impact our diversity and kind of rich community character that we have had, a long history of.
Great. I'm not going to respond to every question, as you've synthesized a number of important questions, and we have read, both Ben and I, and presumably Craig, have read the 370-odd surveys that have come in, so those are some of the, top, concerns that we hear. Right over here, 2 rows down, Craig. Right on the aisle. Oh, nope. Sorry.
My name is Caroline Graff, and I would like to say a few words for involvement, innovative housing for differently abled people.
Okay.
As adults with developmental and intellectual disabilities, we have the right to housing of our choice. We are diverse in our abilities, needs, and wants. Oak Park can be an innovative leader in creating a more inclusive, diverse housing environment. We adults with DD/ID and our families strongly encourage the Village of Oak Park to consider involvement ways to expand housing opinions.
Great. Thank you so much. And I'm guessing you might have tweaked a word at the end. I thought so. I didn't want to be rude, but thank you. Great point. And we've gotten a good bit of that feedback as well. Did I just see a hand right toward the end of the aisle?
Hi, my name is Deborah West. I'm a local realtor. And this gets back to what Linda was saying about data and the previous questioner. I've been a realtor for 8 years. I've lived in Oak Park for almost 30 years. I have no idea how many rental units we have. As a professional realtor, I've actually tried to find out the percentage of our housing stock that is single-family homes and condos, which may be rentals, and strict rentals. And I hear figures bandied about in public and on social media all the time. And so it seems to me that this whole study, it would behoove the study to first get a handle on the data. What is the nature and the number of each types of housing in Oak Park? And if that's known, that would be great to promulgate it as soon as possible, because the public is very invested already in certain numbers, especially renters who are rightly I think, feeling disenfranchised by the village. But I don't think anyone really knows how many there are, and I think that would be really helpful.
Your point is very well taken. Ben has already been in conversation with Craig, with Jeff Pryor from the village, getting exactly that sort of information, in part to lay out the baseline realities and kind of go from there. So, but thank you for reiterating that. Please. Oh.
I wanted to bring up the point of the need to really have a realistic understanding of that, of particularly rental. There is a lot of focus around, from a policy perspective, on units above a certain size. And I think that there are a lot of units in buildings of a smaller size that are being overlooked. And so to have a clear understanding, as Deborah had mentioned, how many condos and townhomes and even single-family homes are actually rental.
Okay. So just for a point of clarification, when you say that these units may be overlooked, are you saying that they're undercounted, or are you just saying?
Well, again, it's hard to know
Yeah,
because
so-
we don't know the numbers. But often, particularly in smaller buildings, folks may not be in any way mentioning that they have rented out their unit. And so, there's a lack of clarity in terms of what's actually out there. And then the policies that are created are focused on buildings with larger units, or the assumption that ownership or the landlord that has units 4 and above. But if you're renting out your individual condo unit, you are an individual landlord.
Gotcha.
And so a lot of times those numbers are not considered under policy, which means renters are not being protected under them. And we also don't know those numbers or the challenges associated with it.
Good point, and if I understand it correctly, it's somewhat kind of springboards off of the previous comment asking for baseline information, and your point, if I can restate it, is dig deeply to make sure that the information is in fact includes, whatever sub-markets there might be in Oak Park. Reasonably correct restatement?
Yes.
Okay,
And so that
thank you.
quantitative data is, as you said, deeper
Yeah.
and more descriptive of what's actually going on.
Good. Thank you, good point, and we're getting all this, and the good news is Ben's going to do all the heavy lifting, follow up on all these questions.
Hi, my
Hi.
name is Joyce Bartlett Salam. I am a condo owner, a new condo owner in Oak Park. And one of the issues, I'm the president of the association, it's a small building, 10 units.
Thank you for your service. I've done that myself.
Trust me. Thank you. The problem that I see for the smaller condo buildings, they have a cutoff of 5 and under. 10 is struggling. Anything between 10 and 20, I guess. I mean, there's so many big buildings being built. We don't have the support for that number, like we do our own garbage, we do everything, and it's kind of a struggle for the smaller units. Our building is in a historic district. We want to stay there, we want to keep it there. But I would like to see more support for the smaller units and more inclusion for
Good.
those
And
additions.
inclusion from a policy and a service provision perspective.
Exactly.
Okay,
That would help a lot.
thank you. So noted.
Thank you for sharing that. That's something we've heard in the survey as well,
Yeah.
that same statement.
It could be, I've recognized a few names from names I've seen on surveys, but I haven't outed anybody, but please, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Corinne Romine, and my family moved to Oak Park in 2008, specifically because we needed special education services, and we were lucky enough to find what we needed in District 97. Our children went through District 97, District 200, and my daughter, who has an intellectual disability, went through the site transition program. She works in Oak Park. She grew up in Oak Park. But our struggle is finding housing, affordable housing for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. The one building, because we have looked everywhere, we have pounded the pavement, and the one building she doesn't qualify to be in because it's for people with mobility issues. How important that is, I get it. However, it doesn't fit our need. We certainly want to be able to stay in Oak Park. My daughter wants to spend her adulthood here as well. She's very proud of her job and works hard and pays taxes as well. And so we want to see some support with that kind of housing. So thank you.
Thank you very much. That's, Craig, you don't have to go far.
My name is Janet Graff. I have been in Oak Park, I think, about 14 years now, and our family owns a home in South Oak Park. We came for the same reason. Our daughter has autism, and we would like her to live by us, and we would love to stay in Oak Park and keep our house. As these large apartment buildings have been going up, I thought a few of them were supposed to be set aside for lower income and people with disabilities. And I haven't seen the transparency in that, and wondering what happened to that, because I just assumed, I was like, all these buildings are going up, by the time she's an adult, this will be great. And I haven't really seen, I should know people by now through the disability community that are in these buildings, and nobody that I know of is in them, so.
Yeah. Thank you. And that's, again, some of the type of information that we're trying to get along the lines that we've mentioned now a couple of times, to kind of give us the data to kind of explain what the market is, and then, go from there with respect to policy audits and, plans for future. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. I think it's a relevant question that a lot of us would have. So as far as set-asides, affordable homes included in a larger development, that policy, that's something that we'll be evaluating later this fall. So it won't be something we'll be providing a lot of detail on in mid-October when we hopefully present to the board, but that will be something we'll be evaluating after that.
So stay tuned. Other key housing issues? Oh, please, sir. Right in front of you, Craig.
I've been involved with this for a long time, but there's really one issue that I see, and that's gentrification. I know we're not supposed to use that word anymore.
We're not? Did I miss a memo?
Nobody seems to want to.
Okay.
But we talk a lot about diversity, inclusion, economic diversity, all of these things. And I believe that talking a lot about having an economically diverse community while subsidizing over 1,000 units of tiny, very expensive studio and efficiency apartments is simply hypocritical. We, for various reasons, I'm happy to discuss those, started the 1980s or so as an economically diverse community. We had older buildings that are never going to be luxury buildings. We have these very nice court buildings from the 1920s that have masonry walls and hot water heat and are walk-ups, and they're not going to have elevators, and they're not going to have more bathrooms, and they're probably not going to have central air. But they're nice buildings, and they're scattered all over the village. So we have always had a range of costs. We've had very expensive houses. We've had some reasonably affordable apartments. We have new, we have old. In the past 20, 30 years, people have forgotten why some of those things happened. And they look at all of those buildings, and if it is not a new top market rate apartment, it is an opportunity to tear it down, start over, gut it, do something with that. I'm seeing in the single family market that anything under about $400,000 is not sold as a livable house. It's sold as a flipping opportunity. And realtors tell people that well, nobody's going to move into this house. You need a new kitchen, you need a new bathroom, you need all of these things. And they get sold to flippers. who change the kitchen, change the bathroom, and double the price. So I go to the survey that I'm sure you know about from UIC, that they have a city and urban institute or something like that, and they have printed these maps showing how income has changed in communities in Chicago. And in the 1970s, something like 60% of the Chicago area by neighborhood was middle class. Their current survey, there's something like 30% poor, 20% upper class, and the middle class is tiny. It's 17% or something like that. So we are driving out anybody who can't afford pretty high rents. And our policies haven't necessarily been addressing that. I also want to make the point that we seem to have been sold the idea that the way to get more affordable housing is to build affordable housing buildings, or make the people who are building luxury housing include some percentage of affordable units. If I were running this, I would say, let's look at some of these existing small houses, older apartments, spend a little less money fixing them up, because all of these new affordable units we're building cost $400,000 or so for an efficiency. And then we've written an ordinance that says if a developer of a large building has to put in affordable, or chooses to put in affordable units instead of making the contribution, that they automatically get zoning increases to build more luxury units in order to pay for the affordable units. Overall, I think we have the issue of, does Oak Park have to grow? Do we need more population? Do we need more richer people? Do we need to attract businesses that support the people who live here? Or do we need to attract businesses that are fancier and supposedly bring in more money?
So thank you very much. Difficult to summarize. You've given us a kind of a rich.
I've written you a page and a half of fine print that's in your survey.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I think, it's kind of safe to summarize it, is that your key concern is affordability and, steps to get there, and you've touched.
As a preservation.
Yeah.
I see people on the left saying we should tear down all of our existing houses because it's not green enough, it doesn't accommodate enough affordability. Why, and I have heard from people on the village board, why do we worry about the houses of dead white men? Why do we worry about the houses of the people who stole the land from the Indians? And on the development side, I hear, well, young people don't want to buy 100-year-old houses that have 5,000 square feet and have 100-year-old plumbing. So I don't see any voices speaking for either preservation or just the notion of community character. And I heard a conversation in which the previous village president talked about, we want to be a smart city. He would have torn down the whole place and put up Ira.
So I believe you added a few more layers to what you put out before as the affordability challenge. You added the balance challenges of balancing historical structures and other structures as well as sustainability.
The greenest building is a building that already exists. And I also challenge the notion that the way to get more affordable, I would like to encourage the existing affordable units to stay affordable and for more of those to become affordable.
Great.
And I challenge the notion that these deals in which we subsidize people to build affordable units that cost $400,000 to build, so that a not-for-profit can sell tax benefits to a for-profit. If you say that we need to build more affordable housing, I would like somebody to justify that claim.
Great. Thank you again, and I'm going to turn the mic over to the woman who's already got the mic. Please.
All right, good evening. I just want to lift up the issue. I am not, full disclosure, an Oak Park resident. I am, however, the Cook County Commissioner of the First District. So just wanted to put that and shared custody and raised 2 kids in Oak Park. But Oak Park does have a history of discrimination, and I didn't hear that come up. And so currently Oak Park Apartments is being censured by HUD for discriminatory evictions disproportionately impacting Black women. Multiple complaints filed by fair housing agencies have gone unaddressed for years up until now. So as we're listing out and naming some of the issues that impact this community, discrimination is among them.
Yeah. Thank you very much for lifting up, and we are aware of that and the issue that you identified, and we're asking for information on that as well. So it's not escaped our initial screening for knowledge. But right in front of you, Jen.
Hi.
Hello again.
Thanks for giving me a second issue I wanted to bring up, which is the impact of climate change on our housing stock. We do have very, very old housing stock. And as we all saw this summer, many of our homes flooded, particularly in Northeast Oak Park. And I totally agree that the greenest house is the house that exists, and we need to find ways that the village can support homeowners in retrofitting their homes to keep them resilient in the face of climate change and also help them contribute to the goals of the Climate Action Plan that we approved last year. So I believe the Climate Action Plan says that 70% of our greenhouse gas emissions actually come from Oak Park buildings, including homes. We have a lot of old gas boilers and those sorts of things. So how can we help make our housing stock, multifamily and single family, more resilient in the face of climate change and help actually take action to contribute to reducing greenhouse gas emissions in the village to meet our overall climate change goals?
Great. Thank you. And again, we've gotten a lot of similar comments, again, looking for the balance points with sustainability and all the other important issues. But thank you for articulating it as well tonight. Did I miss a hand over here? If not, I'm not gonna run out of questions, so. Oh, I'm sorry.
Again, to kind of build on what the two of you said, but another housing issue is we have the older housing stock.
Yeah.
And a lot of that also are rentals and condo built, I feel your pain in the same spot. Having more support about how to plan for it. You know, I'm hearing about some of the rules that may come into play, but that's not support. And so as we look at what could potentially be some very, very, very expensive costs that many folks do not have the ability to pay for, how can we begin to proactively plan for those things that are coming up in the future? In my condo building, we just bought a new boiler. And that was an experience that, you know, with the shortage, we didn't know if we'd be able to get one, and it took us 6 months to get a new boiler. And so that boiler we're expecting generally has about a 25-year, you can push it a little bit more, lifespan. If you're talking about retrofitting the building to electric, we don't have the money for that. Because it's not just the boiler source, but we have radiators and all of that. So if that is something that we want to think about as a community, what would a plan for that look like? Yeah, and what can we begin to plan for in the next 25 years and give us time to prepare and save for that?
And thank you for sharing that. I do want to point out, even aside from this housing study process, there is a resource from a nonprofit called Elevate Energy, and it's called the Multifamily Energy Savings Program. So it can work for both rentals and it can work for condos as well. So really any sort of energy efficiency upgrades, aging boilers, AC units, Elevate Energy is a great resource for that. And they work throughout the region.
And I wanted to thank you because your question just teed up the question I was just going to lead into. So thank you for providing that perfect bridge, because this was the next question that I wanted to get your feedback on. I'm sorry. Before we go to the next question, I see another hand. Thank you for everybody who was helping me see that another hand had gone up. Or a familiar hand had gone up. So.
Well, once again, I want to piggyback on what Linda said, but I guess I'm also moving on to your issue, your next question about other issues. The perennial third rail in Oak Park is parking, and parking is intrinsically tied into housing. We don't have enough parking in Oak Park. That affects who can move here, who decides to move here, of any housing type. And our thousands and thousands of older condo buildings, whether they're rentals or individually owned units, the lack of an ability to park an electric car, I think, and many realtors feel, is just a huge train wreck, not to mix metaphors.
It's okay, you already started with third rail, so you're going train.
And that is a related issue to housing. And I'm sure you don't want to get off track, but I think it needs to be addressed in your report.
Yeah. No, actually, we've been hearing about parking in, so many different perspectives, so many different conversations. You were the first person, I believe, who specifically said to us, kind of pointed out the electric vehicle parking, which is a growing issue, which is somewhat separate and distinct, although related to other parking issues. Sir?
Gary may have covered this, but I don't understand why all the housing that is vacant, that is here, maybe the village could subsidize the landlord, could do something, so we don't have to build really new, expensive housing when we have it already here. That's
good point, and that kind of links to some of the previous comments about sustainability and green building. So I just wanted to point out the second question that I just identified that some of you have started to reflect upon is asking you to help kind of look around look over the horizon. What are some of the issues that may not currently be big issues with respect to Oak Park's housing situation, but you envision them having a substantial impact in the future? So exactly like the electric vehicle issue is I think a good example of one that may not be a major issue yet, but could become a major. Are there other issues that you think that we should be aware of that you think will only grow in their prominence and their significance, so that we should try to be proactive and helping address some policy options for them for the future? No admitted futurists in the room? Oh, I know some of you in the room are futurists, but that's okay.
Changing demographic.
There you go, Mark. About time, man. I was going to call you out by name. So tell me about that, Mark. What do you mean by that? And how does it impact housing? And we'll give you a microphone. We may regret it, but we'll give you a microphone.
I have shared this in the focus group, but I think it's appropriate to bring up since you asked. And the demographics are changing dramatically, more and more and more older people with changing needs. So not only do we have to address changing needs, but we also have to change our own attitudes about that population. And we have spoken before, so I just wanted to bring it up, and maybe other people can piggyback.
Thank you, Mark. Craig, right back behind you. Oh, I'm sorry.
Hi.
Hi.
I just wanted to mention an issue that I think somebody referred to it before, but that's climate change. So we already have some impacts of climate change, but they're going to be major impacts as we move forward. And so things like flooding and other impacts on the houses, especially the older stock.
Great. Thank you very much. And Craig, I believe the second woman in. Thank you.
Just to kind of go along with
with Barb's comments over there. I think incorporating universal design as we start, as housing starts to build. So if we can incorporate universal design that can be accessible for seniors, for people with disabilities, it would be accessible for everybody. So it's something to consider as an issue moving in the future.
Yeah. Thank you very much, and completely agree. But any other issues that you think are going to be really substantial key housing issues in Oak Park's future? Well, oh, I'm sorry. I keep turning around and hands go up. So
I don't want to monopolize.
it's quite all right. We're enjoying your conversation. So
I think it's here already, but I think it'll become even more prevalent. You've mentioned the need for housing for young people with disabilities, but I think young people in general are quite invisible in our village. And there is an assumption, I don't know where we think they go after high school and after college, but I moved here as a young 20-something. I don't see the options that were available to me then. And I think that that's something that needs to be considered and being a little bit more out of the box thinking about housing types that could solve the challenges we have with being able to have young folks also stay in the village and not necessarily have to move elsewhere.
So may I kind of ask you to, give me a little bit more of a sense of the housing that you said was available to you as a young person that you're not seeing and you think would be good to add to the housing inventory?
Well,
what types of housing?
The housing is still there. The cost of it is no longer.
Okay.
So, I lived in the building right across from the Y. And it was quite affordable for someone in my age group.
Okay.
The prices overall have gone up, and so for a young person either coming out of high school that has, a job here or a person who's coming out of college, unless you have 3 roommates, these prices are not affordable. And so many are living at home. I know my daughter's living at home right now. Be nice if she could afford a place.
We won't tell her what you said.
No, I mean, it's part of your development. And so we want to see that, but also it's what brought me back. Because I moved away, I did my cool thing in the city, but then I thought, but I remember Oak Park, and I came back. So if you want young folks to come back and raise their families here, you have to make sure that they know that there's a place here for them.
Okay, thank you. And I only was kind of pushing at you because I wasn't sure if you had a particular housing type, and it sounds like your answer is more about affordability.
Well, and as I say, it's thinking out of the box. I mean, even converting, there's more talk, and more of this is happening in California, to convert some homes into places where a few young adults could live, or a few seniors could co-live. I mean, when we look at space, right now I own 2 places. My mom lives in the other place. And does it make sense for her to be in a 3-bedroom, 2-bath? That would probably be better for a family. But where am I going to move her? The prices have gone up so much, you can't move anywhere else. So we need to have some interesting solutions for, we have many more people now that are single adults, whether they're seniors or young people, or we have a lot of families that have, because of divorce. So where we had people living in one household, there are quite a few families in Oak Park where now they're taking up 2 housing spaces. You may have one in a condo and one in a house. So we're the same number of people utilizing more houses.
Yeah, all great points. I think, Mark, to your left.
Thank you for that. And listening to you, it got me thinking, so homes for a changing region. So maybe it should be changing homes for a changing region. And some of the things you brought up, like the older people and the younger people, intergenerational housing, where younger people can get a break on the rent because they're there helping out the older people in the building. But that's not what we've done in the last 50 years. So let's change how we're even thinking about the homes in the changing region. And I will stop, but thank you for that.
Great. And you've got a couple of hands to your right, Craig, and
one of the, just because it sounds like we're kind of looking at a little bit of solutions here, we also have to think about our teachers, our police officers, those folks as well. And that would be a good, having a different mix of people together in a living situation, like a condo building or something like that. So you could have people with disabilities plus people that are also serving the community as well.
great. Thank you. And I think if you passed it to your right, our friend the commissioner is had her hand up.
Hi, Wanta. Wanta's my friend. What's your name again? We run into each other all the time. Linda. When Linda was speaking, and your name, is it Mark?
Yes.
Mark. Mark said, and maybe it was you, who said, I'm hearing affordability, but I didn't hear her when she was laying out this need for our young people to be able to have a community to come back to. I did not hear affordability in it. I think it's part of it, but I think another part of it is community that they return back to. And I know that in working with Wanta for many years, one of the things that she extols and loves about Oak Park and is very protective of Oak Park is the community aspect. And I know that in watching her raise her children here, that would be something she would want her young people to be able to come back to and be able to have the opportunity to raise their families here. So I think it's more than just affordability. It's about protecting the culture and the climate and the community and the spirit of what has been established here in Oak Park. So that goes beyond affordability.
Good. No.
I was not going to speak, but when we talk about affordability, we really also need to talk about taxes. And taxes, property taxes, are really killing us. And that's why a lot of people can't move here and have to move away. But some key words, and Linda talked about it, and Deborah, the ADU movement.
Accessory dwelling units.
Accessory dwelling units, which we, Oak Park, I believe, Craig, wherever you are, we have moved forward. Chicago has moved forward. Other communities have as well. But we really need to pay more attention to that. And intergenerational, and Mark could talk a lot about that, because he and his daughter and family live in a two-flat. They moved from their house into a two-flat. So there are possibilities. Then there are tiny houses, and there's co-housing, and there's home sharing. And this young lady over here talked about police and fire. We used to have programs here where the village subsidized folks who were police, teachers, firefighters, so that they could live in this community. And the building that I think you referred to, which sadly your daughter doesn't quite fit, but above Sugar Beet, that is, certainly a building that was built intentionally for folks with disabilities. And I don't know about the one on Oak Park Avenue, which is new, South Oak Park Avenue, but I thought that was built to accommodate a number of types of folks who could afford less. And I really do not think developers should get money, tax credits, et cetera. They need to set aside units so that we don't discriminate in all different ways. I mean, I'm surrounded by very large buildings that are quite diverse. However, I can't live there. She can't live there. You know, the folks who do live there, and then they flip the buildings. Forget flipping homes that need help, but those buildings are built to be flipped. We need to bring in folks who know how to build housing, who know how to maintain them. We have buildings, sadly, in this community that are falling apart. And when I moved here in 1972 with our little children, housing was a disaster, and community working with the village changed all of that around, inspecting properties regularly and keeping them up. And I am not going to throw out several buildings that have been major issues with problems because, just like this building, hasn't been kept up. Don't knock it down. I agree with you, Gary. You know, fix it up. And the same with older apartment buildings. Put elevators in. I mean, those things are possible so that we can maintain a very diverse community for everybody.
Great. Thank you, Sandra. I thought I saw another hand up just as you were getting the mic. Was there another hand someone wanted to speak to? Issues, future issues? Well, then I'm going to pivot. And we've been asking about issues, challenges, and now I'd like to go towards goals. So this is where, if you can translate some of the issues into goals that you'd like the village to identify and establish and work for in the future. So what are the housing-related goals, kind of the policy positions you would like to see the village take and, you know, have that be the North Star to navigate towards over the next 5 or 10 years? And it's embedded in some of the things that you've been saying before, but I'd like to give you a chance to identify them as specific goals. Oh. Thank you.
I'd want to see more, so there's clear, along with the demographic changes, we need more flexible housing options for people with different needs. That is going to have to be, I love the old houses. We need new buildings and new building types that can accommodate, that are more accessible, that are more flexible. So whatever needs to happen to facilitate more flexible, more ability to build new types of flexible homes that can accommodate more people and their needs, and also really get at that kind of missing middle housing type, the two flats, the condos, the small multifamily buildings, that can add density in a gentle way, bring more people. That's just not being built for a lot of factors related to zoning and construction costs. But we're getting a ton of big luxury buildings. We've got our old single-family homes. People are building new giant single-family homes on lots, but we're not getting more of the more like the townhouse condo, that I think could really add a lot of value to this community and create more flexible options for homeowners in the future.
So if I may restate it, tell me if I've got it. You want to make as a goal, in addition to any of the existing homes, you want the new homes to be targeted towards some of the more creative, smaller scale, perhaps more affordable, the missing middle concept. A lot of housing for the wealthy, some housing for the affordable market, but the missing middle is what you're referring to. Thank you. There's a young woman on the...
I guess at my age, I'm stuck on condos and what I do and where I stay.
That's quite all right. That's part of your charm.
But I would like to see... I have an elderly lady that lives in the building. She's been here forever and a day. And she's always saying, oh, they haven't caught up with the condo rules and regulations. Give them time, Joyce. Give them time. I would like to see, since there's so many new condos in Oak Park, I would like to see a department or something that's going to focus on helping these types of housing prosper and rejuvenate. Because I love my unit. When I purchased it, it was like, oh, this is it. And it's an old place, but I want to stay, and I'm the president because I want it to stay nice, and we need that. And our first inspection, since I've been there 8 years, our first inspection is next week. And I've been the president 3 years, the treasurer 4 years. This is the first inspection I've seen. So I listen to Pat when she say, give them time, but how much more time? I like to see that for the future.
So if I can kind of restate that again, I think I'm linking that your first comment was you wanted more support, and your goal comment was you want an entity, a body, someone to be the entity that will help you get that support. Thank you. Please.
Yeah, I'd like to piggyback off that comment about condos, especially condos with seniors. My mom is a senior and she owns a condo in Oak Park, and she's getting hit with like special assessments, and it's more than her mortgage. And so now it's at the point where she now has to sell her condo. And I think maybe having an entity that deals with seniors in housing and in condos, like where do you go for support? Where do you go when your condo association is off the rails? Where do you go when your elevator is failing inspections? Like the elevator hasn't passed an inspection since she's been there, and people are still utilizing that elevator, and there's no one to complain to other than your condo association, and the village doesn't really deal with that, and there's no one to reach out to here at the village. So someone that deals with condos, yes, and someone that deals with buildings that are under 4 units, because most of the apartment situations that the village deals with are 4 units and above. And if you're a privately owned apartment building, they say, well, get a lawyer or do this or do that. But if it's privately owned, there isn't a lot of funding or grants for people who are privately owned 2 flats, and there aren't a lot of sustainability resources for 2 flats. There's just not a lot for people who own 2 flats. There's not a lot of incentive for privately owned 2 flats, and there's not a lot of support for seniors who own condos.
Great.
So I'd like to see more of that.
Great, thank you. So I think you've actually taken her comment and you've broadened it a bit to be not simply condos, but also for rental buildings and, 2 flats and the like, for support for the smaller, the ones that might be overlooked otherwise.
Because we also want housing for the middle income.
Yeah.
But we're not giving support to owners who own middle income properties.
Well stated, thank you.
And if I can add while Craig is passing out the mic, there's another resource from an organization called the Chicago Bungalow Association, and they actually offer that for 2 flats as well.
Thank you.
This is probably self-evident, but a housing-related goal, once the village adopts a plan, is to update the zoning that exists, which is woefully out of date and has become a joke in Oak Park, and I think it's really undermining people's trust in our village government, period. It affects everything beyond housing. If every giant project just gets a variance, then what is the purpose of the existing zoning that we have now, which is highly likely to change with all of the wants that the community has. But I just think it's worth stating explicitly, our zoning needs to be updated.
Thank you. That's one of the reasons we're asking you to translate challenges to goals here to do just that. And then Craig also, woman up in the bar seats back there.
Just briefly, I think COVID has been a real challenge to everybody. And the village did have programs for condo owners, educational programs regularly, as well as for renters and for landlords that had to follow certain rules and regulations. So where it all is now, I can't speak to it, but we did do them, and then it stopped during COVID, which was understandable.
Thank you, sir. And then, thank you.
I actually have 2 goals. One would be that we would have like a low, I don't know how many properties the village owns at this point. When I moved here, the village owned 20 properties, so hopefully it's less than that. But if there is a property that the village still owns, it would be wonderful to have a low-income housing project that was energy efficient, that way, in saving money on all the bills and things, solar and geothermal, all kinds of ways we could save money that would help low-income people as well as everybody else. But my other goal would be that we could create some kind of, similar to co-housing, but condo-like in a way that each young adult or disabled person could own a condo, but there would still be a community center for them where they could get aid and things that they need, but also, it could also bring in people from the community to mix with them, and so kind of like an apartment, but with a special little twist, I guess.
Okay, great. And this is exactly some of the creativity and some of the aspiration that is exactly, again on the rail. Yeah.
So what I would like to see, and I kind of looked into this previously right after COVID, so I'm not sure if this is already happening. What I know is that it's not being enforced if it is that I would love to see some type of percentage cap or something on increasing rents. I know after COVID, some people's rents went up 10, 15, 20%, and I know that this was happening a lot in the community. If you're in the renters groups, you're seeing it everywhere. People are having to move because they're getting entirely priced out. And that's mostly happening to our elderly community. They're the ones who can't pick up another job or get a roommate and things like that. So I don't know if that is something that's possible or something that is already there. I have not been able to find it. I've asked trustees. They're not aware of something like that. So I would like to see that in some realm, or the enforcement of it, or how do we do that? Because people don't want to say anything. They might not have other options. So you might just be stuck paying that rent because you can't say anything because you're not going to be able to get another apartment somewhere else.
Great.
For whatever reason. There's lots of reasons why someone wouldn't be able to.
Great. And just wanted you said rent cap, so.
A percentage cap of increase.
Yeah.
I understand that bills and things go up,
Sure.
right? Inflation happens. Some kind of percentage where it can go up reasonably, not 30% the next time you have to sign a lease. Something that's more along with the rate of inflation.
Thank you. And you're not alone. We certainly read that in some of the other responses, so. Oh, I think we've got a flurry of hands over here. I thought there might be a hand going up over there too, but I think there was just a little bit crosstalk, so we've got.
I'd just like to comment on the notion of auxiliary dwelling units and changing zoning to allow big houses to be split up into more units and things like that, which is that, again, the auxiliary dwelling units that I see being promoted still cost $400,000 or $500,000 to build. They're building basically a coach house, but it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. In the same way, splitting a house into multiple units costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. And without a change in our sort of market orientation, how do you get somebody to build that and not rent it at a market rent? Rent control is an interesting idea, but I don't even think it's legal in Illinois. And some of us have tried to promote it. But when I hear that single-family zoning is the new redlining and it's intended to discriminate, I think a lot of people live in Oak Park because they like the way it looks. They can afford to live other places. They live here because we do have these old houses and we have broad lawns and we have trees. And you can walk across the street without being hit by a car or having one parked in the crosswalk or something like that. So I think in terms of competitiveness as a community, the overall aesthetics of the community are really important.
Thank you, Gary. Two hands up behind you. Yeah.
I would like to see as one of the goals, and this is more of an operational goal, that as you look at the data and you also project out where you think we will be, because we also have to plan for the future, that we have information that is readily available, that we're sharing with the community about where we are with respect to the goals. Many of us heard about how all of the new apartments were supposed to free up affordable housing. Well, how is that happening? Are we seeing that? If we're not seeing that, what are the course corrections we're taking? So being very, very transparent with the community about what those goals are and how we're moving toward.
Thank you. And part of that, I can't speak for the village, but I think part of that is asking us to come in and do a review and an outside assessment. And as we said, part of that is getting some of this baseline data. So please.
Just building on some of the things that are happening here, this is really cool.
Yeah.
So like what Wanda said, what this gentleman said about this idea of like, maybe a goal could be increasing local ownership of this kind of missing middle rental housing stock. So like it's more like local landlords as opposed to like big investment firm that owns the Vantage or whatever. And then more support for those landlords to be having a relationship with, that could also address the high, the rental increases. It's like, it's a little bit different when your like landlord like is your neighbor. So it could just kind of change the dynamic. And then the ADUs as another opportunity for new rental income, local ownership of those, units, blah, 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 is just, to me, is like so exciting. I'm really into ADUs right now. So anyways, maybe there's something there around like local ownership of rental units that builds community and fosters relationships between landlord and tenant and yada, yada.
Thank you very much. And can I just, you're very into ADUs. Did you write that excellent opinion piece in the Wednesday Journal? I've read it. Take a look at the current Wednesday Journal. This young woman wrote a very nice piece about ADUs and mentioned this meeting. So thank you. So please.
You're talking about all these things about affordable housing and about rent increases and things. Every time that we have a reassessment, my taxes have gone up between $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a time. Which is, I think, something that I don't think renters understand. That's part of what owners go through, and that increase is going to be passed on somewhere.
Yeah. 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 Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Any other comments on this? Because I got another question for you. So what would be some of the key challenges to achieving some of the goals that you're talking about? One of them, kind of went in some cross conversation with response to the suggestion about, rental property, rental caps, and was that legal in Illinois? So that could be a challenge, legality. But are there other challenges that any of you can see to some of the goals that you or some of your friends and neighbors have been talking about? Please, Craig, behind the column. Thank you.
When we built a garage a few years ago, we would have put a rental unit up above it. But because we're in a historic area of the city, of the village, they wouldn't let us do it. So somewhere along the line, we need to have a balance between historic preservation. I mean, you can put something above a garage and it doesn't have to look like trash. It can match the house and so on. So we have to balance the Historic Preservation Commission's job with taking care of people who need to be living in the village. And at this point in time, that does not happen. They are... That needs to be not only a goal, but it needs to be something that's changed. Because we look at it now and think this is such a waste to have this garage and not have anything above it where we could have somebody paying a reasonable rent, and it's a good-sized garage. And so we need to look at that as far as not only a goal, but we need to be changing some of our standards here so that we can have both. We can have a balance between both of those.
Thank you. Excellent point. And it's consistent with some of the earlier points, balancing between some of the goals that may not really be competing, but sometimes are at variance. So please.
I think one of the key challenges is discrimination. We've heard a lot about the the need for affordable housing. And I just, in my own experience on my block, my neighbors up and down would say that they are all for affordable housing until a year and a half ago when there was a affordable housing project that was talked about being built. And then I saw some ugliness come out, masked in, oh, well, we're concerned about parking. You're not concerned about parking, you're concerned about black and brown poor people moving down the street from you. And it's discrimination through and through. And we cover it up in concerns about parking, concerns about zoning, concerns about other things. But we see these other luxury high-rises go in. So I think until we recognize that this community that always likes to tout itself as being progressive has this nasty underbelly of discrimination and racism, I don't think we're going to be able to achieve some of these affordable housing goals that we want to see.
Thank you. And I think what you're saying is if it can't be talked about openly, it can't be addressed openly. So,
I just like to use the word inclusionary housing instead of affordable housing, because a lot of us say like affordable housing as if like we're all like on welfare and expecting people to reduce their rents to like $2 a month, and that's not it. My husband and I we both have 6 master's degrees between us. I'm not looking forward to come into your community and spend $200 in rent. I expect to pay my fair share, for one. But what I'm not looking for is my rent to be increased by $400 in one time. I think that's ridiculous, and that's something that happened to me. So when we're talking about like caps on like rental increases and what people can do, I think that it's like that's not outside of something that's reasonable, because I think some landlords take advantage of black and brown people, quite frankly, with discriminatory measures when it comes to increasing rent. Because first of all, they know that we're there because we don't have a lot of choices in this village. And yes, we're here for the aesthetic. It's beautiful. Everybody wants to be in a beautiful village. And what the commissioner said about building a sense of community, we all want to be in community with each other, but nobody wants to be discriminated against, and nobody wants to be in a community with people who don't want to be in community with them. We want to live in a community with people who want to share in community with us. So let's get through that part. But let's get back to the real issue, and the issue is we want to be able to enjoy the same things that you enjoy in our neighborhoods, and that is simply the right to live and the right to have inclusionary housing. And that's just not something that's afforded to black and brown people. And one of the new redlining, if we want to talk about the new redlining, is it's not necessarily inclusionary affordability. It's how you guys use the new fees. Like when you go for an apartment, it's fees on top of fees on top of fees. And when it's not the fees, it's the 720 that you need on your credit form. Or it's now you're going to count all my children, and now you want their backgrounds and things. It's all these other measures that people are using to keep black and brown people out of apartments in Oak Park. It's ridiculous, and that needs to stop. So that's where I am on it. You can argue about it all you want, but that's how I feel.
Thank you very much. We've got a couple more behind you. Yep.
I'm just going to say that what you're describing is not Oak Park, it's late-stage capitalism. That everything goes up as far as the market will bear. We are increasingly a society that is divided into haves and have-nots. And the people who own everything would like the have-nots to go away. They don't have the honesty of saying that, but those are the policies. And I don't know that Oak Park can change that. The business about what credit score you need in order to get an apartment, unless Oak Park pays every landlord a lot of money and one thing that I think we have to reinforce is the difference between affordable housing and low-income housing. I talk to people from outside Oak Park, and they say, boy, you've got a lot of public housing in that. You're really supporting these people from housing projects that come in and what have you. When we say affordable, I think as far as anybody goes is 60% of area median income, which in Oak Park is over $60,000 a year. So we're not talking about people who are being turned out of public housing in the city. And In terms of actual low-income housing, I believe Oak Park has something in the neighborhood of 500 actual housing choice vouchers. And the majority of those people are seniors or people with disabilities.
Thank you, Gary. I think, wait, one more hand up. Oh, well, one more hand up, and then I see another hand up, and then I think we need to respect the time we said we'd let you all go home. So those will be the last two comments, and we'll go to closing. So please.
I think this falls between both of those, both a goal and a challenge. In Oak Park, there has been the assumption that inclusion is something that you just, it's just a matter of having a certain diversity of people within a geographical boundary, and then there's not much else you do after that. And what I think needs to be included in any housing plans is that whether we're talking about racial diversity or age diversity or ableness, differences between that, when we mix people, we are going to need to have supports to help folks understand how they live together. Because folks just don't know that offhand. They don't. And so including in that opportunities and intentional ways of helping people understand the concessions you need to make in order to live, if you've got young people and older people living together, or if you have, because I have seen just in talking about disabilities. I have a unit in another building where a young lady eventually had to move because people did not know how to accommodate her need. And we're seeing that quite a bit in the building where my mother lives, is that folks just don't know how to accommodate that need. We have a lot of conflict in this community between renters and owners. I mean, I come from New York where most people rent, and when I moved here, the things I heard owners say about renters were just really disgusting. So we need to have a major mind shift around how we live together as a community, and we need to have some realistic definitions and words that we use. Please stop using luxury about these ultra expensive apartments. I don't understand what's luxury about them. They are boxes. They are tiny. I live in an older, I have 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. I have beautiful architecture. I would never trade that for these little boxes that you all are calling luxury. So let's be for real. I mean, we lived in boxes like that and they were called projects. The only difference is who lives in them.
Thank you. I won't even try to restate that because I couldn't pull it off like you did. So
Yeah,
please.
I just wanted to speak to the number of, I'm not even sure what's the right word, so I'm sorry if I'm saying it wrong, but low-income units. I would say personally, in my opinion, the Oak Park Housing Authority is a joke. There's no any idea about Section 8 or low-income housing in this area is non-existent. So I don't know, anyway, so I don't know what else to say about that.
Okay. Thank you, so noted. And unfortunately, I had a feeling that if I kept asking questions, I was going to provoke some passion out of you, and I was right. So, Ben, the floor is yours.
So with next steps, it's fairly straightforward through October. We've got the survey, which is live here. If anyone hasn't seen the survey, I'll stick around. I'm happy to make sure you have access to the survey, whether it's paper or online. And then we're targeting mid-October as the time that we carry forward everything that we've heard so far to the village board. The quantitative data analysis, especially the requests that we heard tonight, what we've heard from focus groups and the community survey. Yeah, we're targeting mid-October is when we'd carry that forward to the board. And then from there, after refining the goals and the priorities, then we'd begin to evaluate all the policies, the programs. We heard about the inclusionary zoning policy. That's where we'll begin to evaluate all of those current steps. So That's all I have for everyone. I really appreciate you all making time to come out tonight. It means a lot to me. I think you shared great insight that is incredibly valuable. So thank you for giving us part of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.